Hello, hello, biology. All right, these are the water notes that we took on Thursday. Um, so I'm going to run through these real quick. I am not going to pause for very long unless I actually have something in particular that I want to point out. So be prepared to pause if you miss something, but you need to be filling out your notes based on this. Now, on your notes, there is a bit of a mistake, and I'm not sure how this happened because on mine it's not like this. But if you go into the notes, there's a page that says water at the top. That's the page where these notes go. Okay. Uh, for some of you, that's on page 3. For some of you, that wound up on page 4. I'm not sure why page 2 is completely blank for some of you, but know that this is going to be either on page 2 or either on page 3 or on page 4. This is after the macromolecules page. So go ahead and pull those up before you get any farther on this, because you need to fill out the notes as we go. All right, water. These are the first 3 things that you need to have on those 3 bullets at the top of the page. H2O is the chemical formula for water. It tells us how many of each element is present. So the 2 tells us that there are 2 hydrogens. The fact that there is nothing here tells us that there is 1 oxygen. So H2O is going to be the chemical formula for water. It is an inorganic molecule. That means there is no carbon present in it. And it makes up 65 to 70% of the human body, depending on how healthy you are. That might be a little higher or a little lower. Okay, there are a few things that make water unique. 6, in fact. So, water provides a soluble environment to allow chemical reactions to take place more easily. A soluble environment is an environment in which things can be dissolved more easily. I would suggest that you highlight this, all of it, and this after you write it down. Highlight it yellow, change the text to yellow or red, because yellow is going to be hard to see, so that you remember that this is what this means. Okay, water frequently participates in chemical reactions. That is why it helps a lot of reactions to take place to be in water. That's why having a soluble environment is very important. Okay, it frequently acts as a buffer for temperature. Now, here's a fun little side fact. In the Midwest, where we live, we can typically see a temperature range of more than 30 degrees in a single day. And over the course of the entire year, we may see a temperature range of over 100 degrees, from the coldest day in winter to the hottest day in summer. On the coasts, this is not the case, especially close to the equator. Now, the farther from the equator you get, both farther north and the farther south, this is less true. But on the equator, they frequently see temperature ranges over the entire year of less than 10 degrees. And that is because of the water. Water has an incredible ability to absorb heat and release that heat without its temperature changing significantly. Here, when the sun comes up, the ground gets hot, it absorbs all the thermal energy it can, and then it starts heating up the air, which causes the air temperature to go up. On the coast, the water starts absorbing all of that thermal energy and keeping it to itself. And the ground doesn't heat up as much, and so the air doesn't heat up as much. Then here in the Midwest, when the sun goes down, the air cools off fairly quickly because it doesn't have a large amount of ability to store that heat. So it cools off, the ground starts to cool off, and it gets very, very cold at night, especially this time of the year when we're occasionally hitting 30 or 50 in the evening, or rather in the night. But on the coast, that water that absorbed all that thermal energy over the course of the day starts to slowly release it and give it back off. as the air tries to cool down, it pulls that thermal energy up out of the water, so the air stays a pretty consistent temperature. If you've ever been driving or riding into school and noticed there are always clouds this time of year over ponds, this is why. Okay, it's that same ability to store that heat. So water fulfills a similar function in your body. It helps to regulate your temperature. It can absorb heat and release it to help control the temperature. It maintains homeostasis, in particular through sweating. So when you sweat, your body squeezes water out all over the surface of your body. There's other stuff in it too. It's a really good way to eliminate waste, but the main thing is water. Sweating by itself does not cool you down. That's just your body spreading water out all over the surface of it. That's it. It's just putting water on the surface of your skin. But what that water does once it's on your skin, it starts to absorb the heat out of your skin to cool your skin off. As that thermal energy leaves your body and goes into the water or the sweat starts to evaporate, and it takes that thermal energy with it, causing you to cool down. Now, this is also why when the humidity outside is extremely high, or when it gets extremely hot outside, sweating doesn't work quite so well. And that's the point where you're supposed to stay inside, because there's so much water in the air already that the water on your body doesn't actually evaporate. So it doesn't take any of that thermal energy with it. Or the water actually absorbs thermal energy out of the air instead of absorbing it out of your body. So you don't cool down nearly as efficiently. So that's why when there's a heat advisory, it's a good idea to stay inside, because it's actually dangerous, because your sweat is not going to cool you down like it normally would. It'll just make you wet and slippery. Yeah. So there's that. I already mentioned that it takes a large amount of energy to actually change water from a liquid into a gas. But this is, again, how sweating works. So 4 would be this one. I'll go ahead and move on. Long mouse. Cells have to maintain something called turgidity. Okay, turgidity is kind of like a stiffness. How many of you have ever had a beach ball or a blow-up ball, and it starts to get kind of flabby after it's been out for a while, especially if it's got some kind of a leak? Okay, that's kind of like a cell losing its turgidity. As the water in a cell starts to go down, it starts to get flabby, and it starts to shrink and change. It has trouble maintaining its shape. We recognize this in plants as wilting. When a plant starts to wilt and sag and roll in on itself, that's because the cells in it don't have enough water to keep that internal pressure up, to keep it standing up straight and tall. So turgidity is that internal pressure inside of a cell. Oh, and in plants, that's usually coming from your central vacuum. Now, I've got here a little image to kind of illustrate this. So turgor pressure in a normal plant, the large central vacuole is full. It's got lots of pressure on the area around it, and so it causes that plant to stand up straight like it's supposed to. However, when that central vacuole does not have enough water in it, the cells start to actually shrink. And this is when the plant starts to wilt and roll up and crumble a little bit. Now, this is something I forgot to mention in class, so we're going to go ahead and talk about this. When you put cells in a concentrated salt solution, you can actually affect the turgor pressure of the cell. So if you put it in a concentrated salt solution, then the turgor pressure inside the cell will decrease because water will rush out of the cell. And that's because of osmosis, which we'll talk about later. And so water rushes out of the cell shrinks, it kind of shrivels up, and it gets to the point where it's just not a healthy cell anymore. If you do it on the other direction, if you put one in distilled water, then the water outside is pure, and so osmosis causes the water to flow into the cell, which turns its turgor pressure up really, really high, and it can actually cause the cell to explode. If the pressure gets too high, it will actually rupture the cell membrane and spew all the organelles and everything out all over the place. So too much water is just as bad as too little water. So they both have similar, if opposite, effects. But that's why you have to be careful on how much water you yourself take in and how much you have to supply to your plants. All right, and water serves as a pretty good lubricant. Now, I would counter this as it serves as a great base for a lubricant. Mucus is an amazing lubricant. However, it is not just water. There are proteins and stuff in there that make it slimy and gooey, and that's why it's actually a good lubricant. It's not just the water itself. So, a quick little summary page that I'll throw up here. Here are all 6, one last time. This is the end of this video, and I really hope that this has been helpful for you guys, especially those of you who missed class on Thursday. This is what you missed. So, have a wonderful night.